Steamboat Willie, the first majorly successful synchronized sound animation, was created by Disney and officially premiered on November 18, 1928. The film's success created a turning point in history for the animation industry by supporting the conclusion of the silent era and expanding the newly emerging sound cinema to animation. The film also solidified Disney's future success with innovation in animation, enabling them to establish their individuality within the industry. Walt Disney was the director of the film, along with Ub Iwerks, his chief animator. Walt Disney was an American film producer, animator, and entrepreneur. He holds the record for the most Academy Awards earned and nominated by an individual. Several of his films are included in the National Film Registry. At the time of Steamboat Willie's release, America was nearing the end of the Roaring Twenties, which was a period in American history marked by dramatic change in society following the end of World War I. It was economically significant and also created social changes in the form of consumer culture. During this time, society was very centered around entertainment, with a specific focus on movies and music. People of all ages would attend the movies very often, usually going more than once per week. By the end of the 1920s, weekly movie attendance skyrocketed all the way to 90 million people. Additionally, this decade brought along the Jazz Age, which changed and created new music genres that would continue to influence music all the way to modern times. Furthermore, the closing years of the 1920s brought along the release of The Jazz Singer, a very influential film not only in the history of general film, but Steamboat Willie specifically. Way back in the 1900s, when film was first introduced and popularized, the industry started producing short films that told simple stories. These films were typically only one reel of film and were played alongside non-synchronized live music, with a duration of around 11 minutes. Soon, innovative figures would move west to Los Angeles due to its affordability, weather, and barns that offered good interior shots. By 1913, actors were employed at film studios, including big names like Charlie Chaplin. In 1915, D.W. Griffith, an American film director, came out with the first full feature-length film to include an orchestral music score. The film was an $18 million financial success. However, today it is one of the most controversial films ever made due to its blatant racial discrimination, influence on racial tensions and segregation, and glorification of the KKK. Before Steamboat Willie, there were two other Mickey animations created. However, they were released after Steamboat Willie because Disney and his team couldn't find any distributors willing to release them. All of the cartoons and pitches he sent lacked individuality. There was nothing to set him apart from the rest of the industry, and thus no distributor thought it was worth it to release Disney's pitches. At the time, Disney's career was active but not stable, and he was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The release of The Jazz Singer, the first film to include a substantial amount of dialogue, also known as a talkie film, was the main inspiration for Disney to add sound to their next film. The Jazz Singer was a high-budget movie by Warner Brothers, containing a 350 word count and 6 songs. The movie required new sound equipment, and only 40% of theaters had that sound equipment in 1927, its year of release. Even though The Jazz Singer swept the country, movie distributors were still unsure of what lay ahead as of spring and summer of 1928. Steamboat Willie was not the very first synchronized sound film to be released. Max Fleischer's My Old Kentucky Home was released in 1926 using Phonofilm technology. Steamboat Willie was recorded using Cinephone technology, and The Jazz Singer was recorded using Vitaphone technology. However, Fleischer's cartoons did not impress Disney at all, even compelling him to say, quote, "My gosh, terrible. A lot of racket and nothing else. I was terribly disappointed. I really expected to see something halfway decent. It merely had an orchestra playing and adding some noises. The talking part does not mean a thing. It doesn't even match. We sure have nothing to worry about from these quarters." So, armed by encouragement from Fleischer's failure, and inspiration from the Warner Brothers' success, Disney set out to create the very first majorly successful synchronized sound cartoon. I stress the word majorly so much because Steamboat Willie wasn't actually the very first sound film, not even the very first sound animation, but his film is the one that really made the impact and turned the tide around for future sound cartoons and future Disney productions due to its wide success. Steamboat Willie was the first animation of Disney's to be planned from the beginning to be a sound cartoon. Disney wanted to change the world of animation, plant himself right into the center of innovation. With this new idea, he facilitated one of the most important turning points in the history of animation. At the time, there was still doubt among investors that the audience would enjoy a cartoon that incorporated sound because they were afraid that the music and dialogue would destroy the whimsical, fantastical effect that cartoons were meant to bring. To combat this, Disney used sounds that were outlandish and unrealistic, matching the energy of the visuals. In order to get a sense of whether their sound cartoon would succeed, Disney and his brother Roy ran a soundless version of Steamboat Willie to an audience of potential investors and assorted family members of all ages, using a makeshift sound setup to create a sort of prototype for the film. Investors and children alike loved it, and the demo was a success. Since Disney put so much stress on the synchronization of sound and animation, the music was recorded first and then animated on top of. Wilfred Jackson, an animator at the time, said that he played music at multiple tempos until Disney was satisfied. Disney made exposure sheets indicating the action in the image and the number of frames for each drawing, while Jackson made bar/dope sheets containing precise data on rhythm, tempo, and beat notation so that each measure would have an accurate description of the action in the image. The animation was almost purely mathematical, associating beats per minute, BPM, with frames per second, FPS.
Steamboat Willie premiered with a 2-week run with a movie called Gang War at the New York Colony Theater on 53rd Street and Broadway. Steamboat Willie's premiere is considered Mickey Mouse's birthday, even though he was featured in other films before it. The film was 7 minutes and 46 seconds long, and Disney was quoted as saying the effect on our audience was nothing less than electric at the time, in the book of Mice and Magic, A History of American Animated Cartoons. He also said, quote, "They responded almost instinctively to this union of sound and motion. I thought they were kidding me. So they put me in the audience and ran the action again. It was terrible, but it was wonderful, and it had something new." There wasn't a single moment of silence in the film. Even the boat, smokestacks, and water had sound. Steamboat Willie was a major success, receiving glowing accolades in the press. Being the first animation to be considered critically and commercially important for Disney, it created a turning point in history by creating Disney's unique mark in film history and kickstarting Disney on a path to the worldwide stardom it has today. Emboldened with the success of Steamboat Willie's experimental step into the world of sound animations, Disney went on to create other innovative firsts and turning points, solidifying Disney's individuality in the industry by pushing the strengths of technology and innovating animation. In 1932, they released Flowers and Trees, which is largely considered to be the start of the Technicolor boom, and was the first animation to win an Academy Award. It won Best Short Subject Cartoons, a category first introduced that year. After Flowers and Trees, all features Silly Symphony, which was another Disney series cartoons, were produced in 3-strip Technicolor. He also contributed to the golden age of animation, particularly with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a very revolutionary film with many risky new techniques and innovations. J.B. Kaufman from the Library of Congress is even quoted as writing that Snow White's historical credentials are well known. Disney Studios' first feature-length film, it marked a significant turning point for Walt Disney himself, for the Disney Studio, for the art of animation, and to some extent, for American films in general. The film went on to be one of the highest-grossing films of its time. Kaufman also mentions that even though it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, wasn't the very first animated feature, no earlier film feature had showcased the full range of animation technique in the way that it did. This highlights that even though Disney hasn't created very many actual very firsts, he has created many films that are regarded as the first time something was done right, marking him as well worth the significance and impact. Today, Disney's feats and accomplishments have made him a turning point in not only animation, but entertainment and media as a whole.